In her haste to condemn the shelling of Palestinian firing positions that apparently accidentally killed 18 civilians, Margret Beckett does a great disservice to the fight against the media jihad and the radicalisation that it causes. Anyone even vaguely familiar with the context of the conflict in the Middle East is aware of the phenomenon of Pallywood, the alarming habit of corpses dropped in Palestinian funeral processions of jumping obligingly back onto their stretchers, the way Palestinian ambulances seem to deliver corpses to trouble spots rather than to collect them, the way in which apparently dead victims of Israeli brutality are often spotted talking on their cell phones or shifting position to get a better view of the ensuing media frenzy, or the way in which terrorist work accidents suddenly become Israeli missile strikes. This is all part of the global media jihad, that 50% of the war against the West that Al-Qaeda itself admits is being fought in the battle for public opinion. That the phenomenon of Pallywood has come about is, firstly, a direct result of the way that the wire services, who provide footage to the broadcasters, subcontract out the job of gathering the actual footage to local stringers. These stringers are often members of the terrorist organisations themselves, or at best sympathisers. But the fact that some of the most outrageous distortions of reality, such as the Grossman story, the Battle of Jenin, the Al Jura case, the Gaza beach shelling, the Lebanon ambulance hoax, Reuters Gate and of course Carnegate, are repeated by the Western media without even the most basic fact-checking, is indicative of intellectual laziness at best and deliberate bias at worst. Unfortunately, the complicity of the BBC with Hezbollah in its agreement not to show British viewers the launching of Katyusha missiles from Lebanese hospital car parks, school playing fields and heavily populated areas, whilst happily broadcasting images of the damage subsequently caused to those areas by Israeli retaliation, falls squarely into the deliberate bias category. So too does our Reuters digital manipulation of images to add more missiles and smoke, and the deliberate staging of photos with children's toys and even Palestinian children to give the resultant images human interest. But far worse than the prevailing situation in the media is a situation where the government, who with one hand are trying to stem the tide of radicalisation in this country, reinforce the radical propaganda that causes it with the other. By accepting Pallywood propaganda at face value, the government provides the extremists with authoritative validation of their claims and provide their recruiters with yet another excuse with which to indoctrinate British Muslims. As British Foreign Secretary, Margret Beckett is, presumably, aware of both the Pallywood phenomenon and of recent events in the area, including Israel's complete and painful withdrawal from the Gaza Strip. In light of that knowledge, I feel that she and other representatives of the British foreign policy should be making statements not that hand publicity coups to terrorist recruiters in this country, but instead be making statements such as the following. Whilst we of course deeply regret the loss of life on either side, the doubts surrounding the credibility of the media in the Middle East are such that we are not prepared to comment on any individual case until it can be independently verified or repudiated. Our general position, however, is that we feel that it would be grossly inappropriate to condemn any sovereign nation for the act of protecting its civilian population from attacks, especially when that sovereign nation has already shown its desire for peace by evacuating Gaza and handing it over to the Palestinians. The fact that the IDF are now back in Gaza is a direct consequence of the failure of the Palestinian Authority to end attacks on Israel within its internationally accepted borders. We therefore refuse to accept any suggestion of moral relativism between deliberate attacks on civilians by Palestinians and the accidental deaths of civilians that will inevitably occur when Israel retaliate against groups that routinely use civilian areas as a human shield for their operations. We call upon the Palestinian leadership to recognise the right of Israel to exist, to cease its attacks and to support the two-state solution that has been on the table for nearly a decade.